Evening, old Daniel Hand, RPG therapist, with another good friend here, Mr. Benjamin Taitz, soon to be Dr.
Soon.
Benjamin
Very
Taitz.
soon.
Yeah, very, very soon. I mean, in the next few weeks, as I recall.
No, I'm not that lucky. My advisor said probably like end of May, June-ish.
It's like,
Yeah.
2 months is only 8 weeks, so that's the next.
Well, technically, see, it's still a few.
Not overly wrong, but
yeah,
it's
a
soon.
few is more than 2, right?
Indeed.
So,
Yeah.
There we go. A few. That's more than 2 weeks.
Oh, God. Guys, I'm so sorry. This is already setting the tone for what today is going to be like. Ben, you and I have known each other off the record for a good few months now. But tell us a bit about who you are, why you are, what you are. So obviously you do a podcast with another friend of the channel, Charlene, who has been on a few videos now. Tell us a bit about My Hero Therapy, your absolute nut job of a podcast, and life as you.
So the deep existential question. You said, "Wow,
Yeah.
wow, why do I exist?" Oh gosh.
And you're not allowed to use 42. Okay, that answer's been taken.
Yeah, shoot, I was gonna say that. You stole it from me. I told you that. So, anyways,
I read Hitchhikers long before I met you. Thank you.
That is true. I would be shocked if you had not already known about that before. But yeah, so my name is Benjamin Taitz. I am a psychology doctoral candidate. I will be graduating this year. Finally, as I've been mentioning to all of my already doctor friends, academia is the source of villainy, and I am very close to becoming a Batman villain. Because just if anyone is in a graduate program who's listening to this, you will understand. But especially if you're like in a doctorate program and you're struggling through your dissertation, you know what I mean. Like, honestly, the Batman villains just they know that. But I'm not here to advocate for villainy. So I work in clinical and forensic psychology. I have worked I'm right now kind of taking a bit of break to finish the damn schooling. But I was previously working with people on parole. I've worked with general population, children, adolescents, adults. So I've worked with a wide range of individuals. And I've also worked in psychiatric hospitals as a social worker in my previous life. And so I've always tried to incorporate geeky stuff into my work as much as possible. Like, obviously, if a client already has a specific interest, then I'll go with that. Especially if I don't already know that interest. Because I love it when the client can tell me all about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So long before or maybe like around the time that I first met Charlene, I had a client. This was my first pre-doctoral internship, and he really liked D&D. I, at that time, had very minimal exposure to D&D. I had only played one time, and that was the week before the state of California, where I live, went on lockdown for COVID. And it was a lot of fun. I met of this. It was like a meetup group, and I told them like, "Hey, this is my first time." So they gave me like a preset character, and they're trying to explain all the dice to me. And for the listeners and the viewers, math and me do not get along. Like, numbers, no, they're not allowed near my brain.
In that case, because I know you like Marvel, in that case, maybe
Yeah, right.
There's a lot of numbers involved
A
there.
lot of numbers in role-playing games and stuff, and D&D and whatnot, which I've heard is good for teaching math. So like, cool for. I wish I would have had that in school. Maybe I would have been better at math. I don't know. Now I feel like it's just too late. My brain is just like, no, no, no.
Numbers, get away from me. No, thank you.
Yeah,
Bye.
basically. But my very first, and they didn't tell me. They wanted it to be like, a immersive experience for me where I just kind of experience things as I go. They gave me the barest minimum of information needed to follow the game. And by barest minimum, they gave me like nothing. They just gave me the character sheet and just said, respond to the prompts that the game master gives you. I was like, okay, sure. And then you roll the dice, and the game master will tell you if it's a success or failure based off of the numbers. But they didn't tell me which numbers meant what. My very first roll was a nat 20, so yay for me. But again, I didn't know what that meant. Everybody starts screaming. I'm like, oh crap, what did I do wrong? And then of course they're like, oh my god, it's amazing. How did you do that? And I was like, what did I do? So that was my entirety of my experience with D&D. So this client, has an interest in D&D, and this is a group practice kind of clinic, general family practice. So not very possible for me to play D&D with this client one-on-one, especially because I had no training in D&D. But I was like, okay, well, tell me about the game. Tell me about the characters that you like to play as. Just teach me this thing that you like. And that's like, I feel when it comes to the geek therapy model or just integrating geek culture into therapy as a whole, like it goes back to the interpersonal therapy and the, what is it, Adlerian or Rogerian, whatever it is, where it's like the client is the expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Rogerian, yeah.
Rogerian. Thank you. I should know this. I'm studying for my licensure exam.
You're gonna have the word doctor in front of your name, Ben.
I know. This is really bad that I don't know this, especially because I'm pretty sure I've written about Rogerian therapy in my dissertation. So the fact that I don't know it off the top of my head is just really sad.
No, that's probably why you don't know off the top of your head, because your mind's blanked it out. Because
it's like, it's just business now.
Yeah, I can't. No, I will not think about this unless I have to. Yeah.
So, but like for me, it's like, I want the client to feel like it's not just them coming into this office and I'm telling them, what to do and what's wrong with them. To me, that's not what therapy is. Mm-hmm. To me, a definition of a therapist's job is to teach a client how to be a hero in their own story, whatever that story might be. And so I need the client to tell me their story. So that includes whatever they're interested in. So I will always ask in like my first sessions, what are some hobbies, interests, TV shows, games, movies, like whatever, this kind of stuff that you like. And I will always mention that I like, this kind of things too. So they already know that I'm familiar with it. Because it can be hard for clients to open up to a therapist about these things, because for so long, at least in Western society, it's been very like stigmatized, like, oh, video games, it's going to cause you to be aggressive and kill people. It's like, no, not really.
Oh, have I not killed people? Wow, okay.
So congrats, you haven't killed people. So that's kind of like how, but like, I'm going to rewind even further. This is going to be a long story.
Okay, bear it in mind, we've had 10 minutes already. Just
has it really been?
Not quite.
So, okay, okay.
You take your time. You do as you want. This is why you're here, because I can just let you talk, and I don't have to do a thing, and then be okay. This is it. Thanks, guys. Bye.
I love talking. I far more than writing. Like That's why I have like podcasts, because then I could just talk. But I first found out about like using the geek stuff in therapy back when I was a social worker in the psych hospital, through I don't know if you're familiar, Dr. Janina Scarlett and her
Yes, I
superhero therapy
know.
work.
Amazing.
Yeah, so like I got in touch with her, and she gave me a lot of ideas of how to like incorporate that into the like psychoeducation groups that I was running in the
Got one of
hospital.
our books down here.
And she became just like my personal hero. She's just amazing. And since then, I've just sought out as many different information and books about using anything geeky in therapy. Like if there's a book about it, if there's something about it, if there's a therapist who's doing it, I want to talk to you and be your best friend. And that's basically how it's happened. I met Charlene quite randomly. She posted on this Geek Therapy community Facebook page, just saying, "Hey, I was thinking of starting a podcast where we like educate people about mental health. Who wants in?" And I just like immediately like messaged her. Like within seconds of her posting it. Like I just happened to see it come up. I was just lucky that I happened to see it right away. And I was like, "Hi, yes, me. I volunteer as tribute."
Well, because you did exactly the same thing with me. I put on the same forum, "Hey, does anybody want to come and chat with me on my?" And within minutes, you'd done the same thing. And then
basically, yes, I tend to like scroll through that group a lot because
it's
I
a
just
fantastic.
love these opportunities to talk about this stuff. But yeah, so I have now two podcasts. One that I do with Charlene, which is called Mental Health Quest, the Therapist Office and Beyond, where we discuss what is mental health, what are the different kind of conditions look like from a clinical perspective. We almost every episode, basically almost every episode, we've had a special guest professional come on to talk about either a diagnosis or different kind of treatment, because we want to educate the listeners who either might be curious about therapy or are in therapy and they want to know more about what types of therapy to ask their therapist about. And Charlene and I will gladly say that we are not experts on all types of therapy. I'm barely an expert on the ones I am an expert on. And I feel like nobody is ever really an expert. You're always learning, right? That's the whole point. So that is that podcast. I just recorded a new episode of that. We recorded a couple of new episodes recently, so those are being edited. And then my other podcast is called My Hero Therapy, that I do with my good friend, Dr. Nicole Hassler, out of Buffalo, New York. Go Bills. I'm obligated to say that now that I'm a friend. So anybody listening in Buffalo, I got you. I've been told by Nicole that is the standard greeting to Buffalonians is just Go Bills.
The RPG therapist has no affiliation with the Bills or any other groups of people that Daniel
They're
doesn't
not
know what I'm
sponsoring
talking
you.
about.
Yes. Not yet. Not with that attitude. But yeah, so My Hero Therapy is a podcast where we do kind of a deep dive into the psychology and mental health of the My Hero Academia anime. We go episode by episode. We just recorded episode 5. So it's a still fairly new podcast, but it is growing. And I mean, we just have fun with it. We gave ourselves hero names, and then every new guest has to give themselves a hero name. It's kind of like the little thing of the podcast. But yeah, so I do those podcasts with those amazing people. And then I also will go to the local Comic-Con events here in Southern California. So WonderCon in Anaheim, San Diego Comic-Con, and the Los Angeles Comic-Con. I apply to present on panels about psychology and insert fandom here. I've done panels on like just about everything now. I've done panels with Charlene. And with Nicole, I do all my panels with my brother, Dr. Isaac Taitz. He is also geeky and awesome. And
Well, I met your brother before I met you, oddly enough. I was on a couple of
yes,
panels about
you
Lord of
guys
the
did
Rings
a
with
panel
him.
about Lord of the Rings.
And then when you contacted me, and I was like,
Yeah,
I was
you're just like,
like,
wait a minute, the name looks familiar.
yeah, it was,
Yeah.
yeah, just.
That's, when it comes to this geek psychology community, I feel like
It's all a bit
everybody
incestuous, isn't it?
very, very, very. We'll find out somehow that we're related. I don't know. But yeah, so that is there. I told my whole life story in what, half an hour?
Quarter of an hour. So you're not doing too badly.
That's improvement.
But I do know that the obviously you're big, because you market yourself as geeky, but your real interest is the anime side, the Marvel side, the DC, the as you say, the hero side, the let's have a look at the characters and these larger than life archetypes who get things done. And
I mean, those are more and more like prevalent interests just because that's kind of what I grew up with. I didn't know about role-playing games until I was like already like in college. I didn't know that they existed. And video games, like the only video games that I was really like allowed to play growing up was like little, Game Boy stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it was
Tetris,
mainly
Pokemon.
just like Pokemon. So
Which
like
ones do you have, blue or red?
I had both blue, red, yellow, silver,
okay.
gold.
See, I was only allowed one. I was only allowed blue. That's just not fair, frankly.
I mean, we as the time. Well, this was shared between me and my brothers. So my parents aren't going to buy each one of us our own. But even then, like, never really played a lot of video games. So while I am familiar to an extent with video games, I don't play them as much. I like to watch, like, if someone is doing like a let's play on YouTube or whatever, like I'll watch that. But I like to watch those more for the commentary than for the actual gameplay because it's just fun to hear people like just making noises, like narrating what they're doing and then freaking out about something. It's like, oh, it's just really funny.
But how do you use your geeky credentials in your therapeutic work? Obviously, you've done some research into literature about geek therapy. I mean, how do you kind of juxtapose one side of you with the other?
I feel like it's not something that needs to be juxtaposed. Is that juxtaposed?
Juxtaposed.
Juxtaposed. I don't know.
That is now a word.
That is now a word. Let's just call it up to the dictionary and have them added in, because it just is something that falls so naturally. If you're talking to a client about their interests, and so I've had, when I was working in that group practice, my first internship, I had a couple like adolescent clients, teenagers, and I don't know if you've ever worked with teenagers, but they don't like to talk.
No, I never noticed that. I just sat in stony silence. It's not only the stony silence; it's the resentment that you're even trying to make them talk.
Exactly. It's the fact that I'm here and how dare you like look at me like So I've had the pouty teenagers and everything, and so like for them especially, like, okay, I'm not gonna like ask you what brought you in here. Like, I'm not gonna ask you what your parents think. I'm not gonna ask you what you think. Let's just talk about, what do you like to do for fun? Are you playing video games? Are you watching any shows? And like the first couple sessions, because with individual therapy, especially, it takes a while to build rapport. And it might be that for a couple sessions, weeks, we're not getting to the therapeutic issue, quote unquote. We're just chatting because we want to build that rapport. We want the client to feel comfortable.
It's developing the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Developing that therapeutic relationship. And so, but once they start talking about, oh yeah, I really like, this one client really like My Hero Academia. And I was like, oh, perfect. I got you.
I can work with you. You can stay.
Yes. The second he mentioned My Hero Academia, I was like, me too. And he's like, what? Really? I was like, dude, whoa. Don't judge me. Like, I'm not that old. And like, we would just talk about all the different kinds of anime, and then we would just like watch episodes in session.
Okay.
But like the way I do it is like, so like, what's going on here? Like, I'm asking them, like, explain to me what is this guy feeling? What do you think is, what do you think about Bakugo? What do you think about, their relationship and wow, what must that be like? What do you think he must be feeling? And because for a lot of people, it's easier to talk about the characters than it is about yourself. But if depending on the character that you're talking about, you're really talking about yourself. And more often than not, the client will start saying, yeah, like I think this, character is feeling this way because like I've been in similar situations and that's what I felt like. And boom, already we're getting into the therapeutic issues without me having to bring it up. The client brought it up on their own because they're talking about something that they cared about. And I'm not doing this to trick them. I'm not, being like, ha, got you, hook, line, and sinker. No.
I'm what, not even a little bit?
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit.
Not
and you
even
call
a
yourself
bit.
a therapist.
Okay. I wait until they leave the room and then like score. He mentioned that he's struggling with anger. Like he admit, like he opened up. Like that's, as a therapist, like, oh my God, the client opened up, the client acknowledged these things, insight. Like that's what we celebrate, right? And so, I found that, okay, this worked for this client. And so after we watched, luckily we didn't watch all.
You're trying to tell me you watched the entire series?
No, we didn't, because he had already seen like almost all of it. So he just wanted to like catch up on the newest episodes at that time. So it was only like a couple episodes. I was like, okay, what other like anime are you watching or that you wanted to like catch up on? Great, because I want to know about new animes to watch too. Like, give me recommendations. And that's like how that went for that character, for that client. And another client, really liked Harry Potter. I love Harry Potter. Like Harry Potter was my first fandom. Like you can ask my parents, you can ask my brothers. Like growing up, like I just loved Harry Potter. So like, fine, okay, let's just talk about Harry Potter. Let's talk about the characters. Who do you like? Who do you don't like? Why do you like them? Tell me about them. What attributes do they have? All that kind of stuff. And again, it flows naturally into what they needed to discuss, what they feel was important to discuss.
Because it's that identifying with the character's traits, their experiences, and
or even they can identify that this is what they would like to be. No, so there are characters that they like, this is what I see myself as, and then sometimes they'll talk about a character which is their ideal. I want to be more like this character. Okay, well, what about this character do you want to be like? But even when we're talking about the ideal, it's really important to that I always try to do is I try to humanize the characters. Because otherwise it can be really hard for clients to be like, I'll never be a hero because I have anxiety or I have trauma or like, I struggle with making friends. Like I always will humanize the characters because I was like, okay, well, what do they struggle with? Like Do they have weaknesses? Do they have, people that they struggle to get along with? Do they have, anxieties? Do they have concerns? And like right now, you will probably be hard pressed to find any character that doesn't have that.
It was right out of my mouth. I was going to say, well,
But
Batman issues? No. Spider-Man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders?
no, Batman is just doing the best he can. That's what I like to say. He's doing the best he can with what he's got. Does he have everything perfectly healthy? No.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Lego Batman. He by the end,
Lego Batman, I will argue, is the healthiest. Is the healthiest mentally of all the Batman.
Certainly by the end of it, yeah, absolutely.
Except for, I really like the Batman as described in the webtoon comic, Batman Wayne Family Adventures. That one.
Oh yes, you've mentioned those before. Yeah.
So that one's also doing pretty good, like mentally healthy and family relationships and stuff like that. So, but Lego Batman
that overrides the normal password. You mean Alfred Butler with 2 T's?
Alfred is Daddy Butler, as I like to call him, because he raised Bruce. Alfred is butler, father figure, therapist, nurse. Like he's everything, and he deserves so much more.
But using those characters, those experiences, those storylines with your clients, I mean, how, in your experience, do they respond? Because I know you say you've worked with a lot of younger clients, adolescents. I've used RPGs and geekery with clients, of all ages and demographics. How's your experience been with? Because again, you work with very specific clientele. Do they respond to that kind of thing, or do they prefer to make the?
I'm not going to use it if the clients don't have that interest in it. So it works when the client has an interest in it. I mean, with the parole population that I used to work with, if they did not already have like an interest in any of these kind of things, then I might just use the generic concept of a hero or being heroic, and they can at least understand that. Because I'm talking about social skills, I'm talking about, respecting the rules of convention and, not breaking laws, which is hard for some people to do. But if they did have that interest, I think for those clients, especially with the forensic population that I worked with, I think they were surprised when I first started working there, and I first mentioned to them that I have these interests and I have these skills in working in these kind of movies and shows and whatever into therapy. Because when you work with people who have like committed crimes and, they, depending on their upbringing, like they've not probably been exposed to a lot of this kind of culture, to geek culture. And so for them, it's very alien, and they probably might look down on it. I've definitely had clients like will say like, well, what kind of you're not a real therapist then. And I'm like, that is your opinion. And yet here I am, and here you are. So, but when I did have some clients among that population that did have those interests, who did like some of the stuff, not just the younger ones, like, and I'm not saying adolescents, like young adults, like, because all my clients there were 18 and up. They were all adults. They were all over the age of 18. I had quite a few that were like the younger adult areas that, yes, they had some exposure to this and they like that. And then I also had actually, a couple older adults. I had this one gentleman, he grew up collecting Spider-Man comics.
Wow.
And like from the like he's like old enough to like remember when they first started coming out.
So he had first edition.
He had
way
like
back when.
yes.
Oh.
He had and he wouldn't mention this in group, of course. He's a very private guy, but like in individual session, he like told me like, yeah, I collect these comics, and I like to read them and everything. Spider-Man was the one that he collected, and so we talked about the comics and what did he like about them, and you know what characters, and again go back into that whole thing. But it was actually, I was surprised. Like, this is a older adult gentleman. I did not really expect that, but I think it's really great when therapists can also be surprised by their clients, because I was like, awesome sauce, let's go there. And I had another client, not an older adult, but middle-aged adult who he liked Daredevil comics, and he in his first session he mentioned a specific issue that resonated with him in his current situation, being on parole after committing crime. And he was like, wow, this I didn't, it just kind of connected. And it was an older edition of Daredevil. What was there was like about these people from the Vietnam War, and they like did some bad things when they were there that were not like specifically part of war.
Right. Okay.
And my client had been, was a veteran, and seeing other veterans that can also still do bad things, because I think a lot of times that military culture definitely builds up that whole like hero identity as well, which is great. But it can also make it really hard when they, as humans, do commit mistakes. And we were able to work with that because the character that he identified with was able to like turn things around and recognize, hey, you know what, I did this thing wrong, and now it's coming back to bite me in the butt.
I'm gonna
But
get my backside kicked by a bloke with horns on his head. Joyous.
It was like Bengal or something like that. There was like the other originally like Tiger or whatever, Bengal or whatever, who was coming after them. And he's like, well, I did this bad thing in Vietnam, and now this guy's coming after me. And he like in the character. And so I obviously not heard about this issue. I had not heard about that character. And so I asked the client, do you have a physical copy, or can you tell me like the issue number so I can look it up like right now on the computer? And he gave me the issue number and everything. We looked it up on the computer in session, and we read it in session. And like there was a moment there where like the character was like acknowledging, hey, I did these bad things. I'm taking accountability for my actions. I don't want forgiveness. I just want an opportunity to try to do differently. And like that's what the client was like going through, being on parole, wanting to do things differently, wanting to restart his life. So I feel like this kind of concepts of heroes and villains and everything can be useful with any client population. Even those that you might not expect to really be receptive to it.
Because at the end of the day, these are very over the top means of telling a story. How many movies have you seen where an ex soldier, a veteran, ex sailor, and ex military personnel of some form have gone and done a crime, job done. But how many times have you seen that story where they're being chased by a man in spandex, and with biff, pow, whack
Yeah.
sound effects all around them. And you said yourself, you didn't expect that client to, an older gentleman comes along, and we associate being a geek very much with
The younger.
the younger, but obviously his geek interest started when he was young, and has stayed with him throughout. I mean, it's stayed with me throughout. It's stayed with you, and there is an elderly
really
population.
is, yeah. And it's not to say that older adults can't get into it. They can. It's it's something for everybody. There's something in this entire culture, this entire realm of possibilities, that you can find something that you relate with. And I was very lucky that in all of my internships that I've had, in all the places where I worked, my supervisors, my clinical supervisors, were very open to this, even though they had never heard about using geek stuff in therapy. But they could recognize the potential, and they saw that I was passionate about it. And they encouraged me to go to more trainings and do more things and learn more, specifically to find a way to work with my clients. It was actually really funny. Was my last internship that I had, my last pre-doctoral internship, before this break that I'm taking now to finish my degree. My supervisor, I mean, I wouldn't say she's like a full-blown geek, but she knew enough about different things that she would even be able to challenge me. Like, she knew a lot about Harry Potter.
Okay.
Because there'd be a lot of times in supervision where I'd be talking about something, and she'd be like, "Don't you?" And I would reference Harry Potter because that's how I relate to myself. And she'd be like, "Don't you mean this?" And actually, it happened this way in Harry Potter. I was like, "Ah, you're right."
Oh, no.
And it's hilarious. And there was another psychologist at that office that she was a big Batman fan. Her car literally had a Batman logo on both sides of it. She drove a freaking Batmobile. And so I was surprised that there were other people in this forensic world that were interested in this, because I didn't expect that. And then I met through this geek psychology community, I met other forensic psychologists that are geeky and do use the geek stuff, sometimes. So it's, at first I thought, oh, I don't know if this is something I can do, professionally. Is this going to be maybe I'll just have the geek stuff on one side and the forensic stuff on the other side, but they can intermingle when it works out.
Mm-hmm. Have you had, I mean, off the top of my head, have you had any examples where that hasn't worked out?
Yeah.
And how did you go about, okay, well, when was the realization, okay, this just isn't working,
I tried to gauge the client's receptiveness to it by just, again, mentioning the general topic of, what does it mean to be a hero in society and all this kind of stuff. But I don't often kind of get to that point where oh, it's breaking down because they're not into it. Because I'll ask them hey, do you want to use this? Do you want to talk about this? They say, no, I'm not going to go there. So in the first couple sessions, I ask them, hey, do you have any of these kind of interests, that down the line I can work in? If yes, please let me know. And it doesn't have to be something that I'm already interested in. In fact, I would like it if it wasn't. But I've had quite a few clients who are just no, I don't like any of that kind of stuff. That's just not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is totally fine. We will do other stuff. And there's still ways to work clients' interests in. They like football. They like, cooking. They like, fishing. They like sports. There's still ways to work that in. So it's still incorporating the client's interests. It's just maybe not
But it's a case of meeting the client
with
on their
yeah,
terms,
which
and
is as it should be. You should always meet the client where they're at. So don't
absolutely.
force your perspective on the client.
Oh, is that what I've been doing wrong?
I mean, I'm not going to say, but
Oh, you are in trouble for that, mate.
yeah. But I always just ask my clients, do you have any of these kinds of interests? This is what I like. What kind of stuff do you like? And if they tell me, oh, I like, football, I like, rom-coms, I like this kind of stuff. Fine, let's talk about that. I don't have to only talk about superheroes and anime. I want to talk about what the client wants to talk about.
And I know that a big part of your PhD has been reviewing the literature on geek therapy, not just the literature, but also the research. I was wondering if I could get your take on how is the world in terms of its awareness of geek therapy? Because you and I, we don't need to be convinced that this is a good thing. But the more straight-laced of our therapeutic client, colleagues, should I say, not clients, they take some convincing. And I was just wondering, is there much out there that we can use to convince them?
So there is a growing number of research articles, and I'm saying research specific, so peer-reviewed research articles that does talk about either like the psychological benefits of parasocial relationships or of video gameplay or of role-playing games. Then there's also a growing number of, research that looks at use of those kind of things as treatment interventions. So like I was looking at, research articles recently that they were specifically using video games to treat anxiety in adolescence, or another one where it was talking about using video games to treat trauma. So it's not a lot. There's not a large body of research. Curse you for making me talk about my dissertation.
I didn't ask you about the dissertation. I asked you about how much literature there is. Two completely different things, Ben. Come on.
There's a lot more literature in the form of like books that are published directly and privately by clinicians, by therapists, such as yourself. You have a book that's right behind you. I can see it to your other side. Somewhere there, you'll figure it out.
No.
Either way, so it was actually really. So I'll just mention briefly about my dissertation. So I was trying to look at the use of geek culture and therapy specifically to build rapport with clients, because as we mentioned, building that therapeutic relationship is incredibly important. It's also incredibly difficult. It is
right.
It's both the most important and the most difficult thing a therapist will do with a client, and it's supposed to happen like at the beginning, and you don't know the client. So as much as I've been able to find, there's no specific research that looks at that specifically. Like, oh, okay, we used geek insert thing here specifically to build rapport.
Right.
There was no research that I could find that was that specific. Like I said, a lot of stuff that talks about the use of geek culture as treatment interventions, as talking about mental health benefits in general, which is great, and we should definitely have more of that. But I found it really interesting that there wasn't a lot. I mean, there's a lot of research about building rapport and different ways to build rapport, and there's a lot of research about geek culture for treatment, but I was looking for like that intersection, and there wasn't much that I could find.
Why is that? I mean, do you think? Because that to me, as a layperson, seems well, not lay, but just seems that's like that's a rather large omission.
I agree. I think that maybe one of the possible reasons is that at least when it comes to like experimental research, it's easier to measure treatment outcomes. So like, okay, how effective is the use of playing video games in the course of treatment of PTSD? That's a more specific treatment outcome that can be delineated than the rapport between the client and the therapist, because that's a very like subjective thing, rapport. I still feel that there's a lot that can be done about researching rapport. Clearly there is research on rapport, and so but I think that when it comes to like this new, because use of geek culture in therapy is relatively new, or at least it's new in the sense of it being recognized as something that is acceptable in the professional world. There are conferences about it. There's professional trainings and certifications that you can get. You can get continuing education credits for those things, but that only happened relatively recently. And so I think because of that, a large percentage of, and this is just my opinion, so if any of your viewers are, researchers of this and they have different explanations, please let me know. But my take on it is we're trying to prove the effectiveness of this as a therapy modality. And treatment outcomes is the kind of primary thing that we want to look at when it comes to, is this effective as a therapy modality? Because building rapport is such a subjective thing, there's no like structured way to build rapport. Not like therapy where we can follow a structured format of CBT or DBT and get a similar outcome to another clinician. And so I think maybe this is, again, my opinion, that maybe they're just trying to show, look, this can be just as effective, with treatment and everything. That's my guesstimate. But I would definitely like to see more research, more articles about the use for building rapport. Because again, like you and I, we know that can help build rapport. And I've seen a lot of the books, a lot of those privately published books mention it. And so we know that it does it. The psychologists are telling people about it. It's just they're not publishing it in the journals.
Peer-reviewed journals.
In the peer-reviewed journals. And, maybe more will do so. I just was not able to come across a lot of them. These databases, depends on the search terms and everything. Maybe I didn't use the right search terms. But I didn't see a lot of those kind of studies. I found quite a bit, that was like, okay, yeah, we, used, video games to treat this, psychological benefits of role-playing games for well-being, and whatnot, like all that kind of stuff. I found quite a bit of that. But I even found in more medical journals, like for physical therapy and whatnot, that they're starting to use like virtual reality games to help with physical therapy treatment, which I think that's really cool. To help with like movement goals and whatnot, specifically for people who might have been like paralyzed and are trying to regain movement. That's like really awesome. And I think because most research just is about, this concrete, like we want this outcome.
Something measurable.
Measurable. That's what research is. And rapport is fickle. You might have rapport to begin with and then you lose it. and you might lose it for no reason that you are aware of. Something that's very specific to the client or to you. Like, it's hard to determine what are those qualities that gets that rapport there and what breaks it.
And do you foresee more research being done on that, or is this kind of you shouting into the void?
I mean, like I said, I would like there to be more research on it. I don't know. I think there will be more research on it because it is becoming more discussed. And at least to my logic, if you're going to talk about treatment outcomes, rapport is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's not the whole focus of the research, maybe it can be a sub-element of the research. Like, okay, we're looking at not only the client's perceived self-report about their anxiety levels, but also how comfortable do they feel with the therapist. So I feel like there's a lot of places where research can go with that. And I hope I'm not screaming into any voids, because the void,
the void consumes.
Yeah,
because the model that my brain keeps going to throughout this conversation is the Clarkson model. Patricia Clarkson, where she had a look at the therapeutic relationship and kind of subdivided it into 5 different. So you got the person to person, the transpersonal, the counter-transferential, the transferential, because we started right at the very beginning today just talking about how important the therapeutic relationship is to any outcome with a client. If you don't get the therapeutic relationship right, there ain't going to be no outcome.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that can be something that can be, research is like, okay, well, it may be you can. Again, I'm not a researcher. Like, I really hate doing research. The fact that I have to do this.
You're sure in the right job, mate. With the doctorate.
I chose a PsyD program. So in America, I don't know if they have PsyDs in England. Yeah. Okay, but like a PsyD is supposed to be more clinical focused and not research focused. And so I was very upset that I had to do a dissertation. I didn't want to do research. Like, I specifically chose this so I can not do research. But like, and I don't know a lot about all the research methodology. I took the class, but once I was done with the class, then I was like, okay, I'm not going to think about it. But I think there can be ways that you can use that model as the theoretical framework for a study, where either you're looking at like case studies, of a client and one specific client relationship with the therapist, or okay, we're also going to use this as part of the framework of, also we're going to use this D&D therapy thing. We're going to research D&D therapy, but let's also have a component of this model of this relationship between the therapist, the game master, and the clients. Mm-hmm. And there was one study that I saw that specifically said, like, hey, there is a potential for good rapport in role-playing game therapy because of just by the nature of the game, mm-hmm. that it's very interactional, very social. And so there's a large potential to help build rapport between the therapist and the clients. And so like that article, like, and that was just like one line. That was the only place where it even mentioned the word rapport. I was like, really, in this whole research stuff, the only place to put the word rapport. I was very upset. But it's the fact that they're saying this has the potential. So there, a lot of these articles are mentioning that there's this potential. The articles I saw about video games in therapy were also mentioning that because video games are very engaging by nature, and so. Mm-hmm. If you have a therapist that can engage in play with the client, that has the potential to change the way that therapeutic relationship is seen, because sometimes clients see the therapeutic relationship as, oh, I'm going to a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And like, he's a professional, he's an authority figure, it's very intimidating. But if you have a therapist that is, playing a video game with you, or someone like me that's watching an anime with you, like, no, then you're not seeing me in that same light. Yes, I'm still a therapist, and we're still discussing the things that need to be discussed. But I feel, and this is just my opinion, that has the potential to help the clients feel a little bit more comfortable, and open up a bit more, because they might feel like, okay, this is someone that, like, they're on my level, they get me. Because when you're talking to your friends, you might use all of these same references, the video games, the role-playing games, and everything, because they understand it. Your friends get it because they play it. So if you have a therapist that also plays it, then I feel that has that potential to kind of help the client be like, oh wow, this could be a more playful therapeutic relationship. It's still a therapeutic relationship. We're not breaking that therapeutic boundary where the therapist is sharing personal details. No, we're not doing that. We're still professionals, but we are engaging with the client on a different level than might be traditionally viewed as appropriate.
And making the whole process less intimidating, more engaging.
Yeah, I think that's really important, to make it less intimidating, because there's so much stigma when it comes to seeking out therapy as is. If we can break it down just even a tiny little bit, if they can have this one experience with a therapist that is fun, then they'd be more likely to seek out therapy again in the future if they need it. Absolutely. But if they have one experience now, no matter how old they are, that they felt intimidated by the therapist, they're not going to be as likely to go seek out help again.
And that, I think, is probably a good place to leave it, because believe it or not, that's nearly the full hour, Ben.
Oh
I don't know how we get through that.
We talk forever.
And we often do every time we talk, mate. Before we sign off, though, tell us a little bit about where we can find you and how people can get in touch if they need to, and etc.
Absolutely. Well, you can find me on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram.
I think that's his name now, isn't it? Twitter X. It's
Twitter
not
X.
Twitter.
X, Twitter. I don't know. Twitex. I don't know. But all of those at MHQ Podcast and at My Hero Therapy. You can also listen to those podcasts on Spotify. I believe also we're trying to get on Apple. We might be on Apple Podcasts. I'm really bad at the technological side. We have our audio tech person handling that. He's really cool. His name is Kyle Vbar. He's on Instagram at Kyle Vbarf. He's super awesome. I'm throwing him a bone there. That's where you can find me on the social medias and listen to the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Hopefully we're in most podcast venues. And then if you happen to be in the Southern California region and you go to any of these Comic-Con events, you will probably find me presenting on a panel. I will be at WonderCon in 2 weeks, so I don't know if this video will be out before then.
Hey, this video is going to be out about half an hour after we finish recording, so don't worry.
Perfect. So I can talk about it then without people being like, oh, I missed it. So I will be at WonderCon in Anaheim, at the Anaheim Convention Center, March 29th through the 31st. I will be presenting on a panel called Water, Earth, Fire, Air, Becoming the Avatar.
Earth, what fire? What's that about? I can't imagine.
Becoming the Avatar.
No, I haven't got it. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll be presenting alongside my brother, Dr. Isaac Taitz of All Mind Health. You can find him at All Mind Health. Dr. Janina Scarlett, yes, Avatar: The Last Airbender.
No, sorry, I was saying role-playing game.
I'm trying to link everybody's social here. You're interrupting me. Okay.
Hey, if Janina wants to drop her line, she can come on here.
I'm trying to be a good friend. I'll be presenting there about Avatar: The Last Airbender on Saturday, March 30th at 9 p.m. We are the last panel of the day. Save the best for last, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But also that means we can go a little overtime. We don't have to worry about another panel coming into the room. So more time for questions, people. If you're going to be at WonderCon, come with a lot of questions. We might have answers.
But also,
so myself, my brother, Dr. Isaac Taitz, Dr. Janina Scarlett, Dr. Elizabeth Sanchez Arvizu of Psychology for Geeks.
Oh, Elizabeth there as well. Oh my goodness, mate. Okay.
Our Community Oasis podcast.
Okay, so just for a quick warning to the world, if you feel something evil happening, it's because those individuals are all in the same room as each other at the same time.
No, we are as I've been posting on social media, we are the new Order of the White Lotus. That's what I'm calling us. We're the wannabe Order of the White Lotus.
God, I think I felt part of my soul just keel over and die at that, Benjamin. Oh my God.
The OG Order of the White Lotus, not the Legend of the Korra version.
Okay,
yeah. That's a whole different video.
And on that note, Ben, thank you so much for coming along. You and I could and have talked for just forever, so yeah, we will no doubt carry on talking once we've finished, but yeah, everybody, please join me in thanking Ben for his time, expertise, and geekiness. If you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, sharing the video and all that jazz, please click everything down below. Ben's links are also down below, but yeah, please just do the usual YouTubey things, and I'll speak to you next time. So don't do anything I wouldn't do. Take it easy and have a good one. Cheers.